Same time, the roles and responsibilities of the lawyers and law students in the current day crisis, which happening across the country and beyond the borders. So, in that particular context only, last year also in the same time, June 7th, if I remember very well, and in 2025 in KL University, when I spoke and interacted with the students and lawyers, and we had a very good interactive session on the significance of the Indian Constitution. What is the significance of the Indian Constitution? Then when our friends and organizers of this AILU event, when they contacted me to talk about that, its implementation, then I went back to my records and I checked. And what did I speak during 2025, June 7th, and where I have to start. So this is aptly connecting from what we discussed a year ago, and from there I'm trying to continue. Okay? So most of you remember that. If you want, I'll share both the PowerPoint presentations to you, and you can compare and you can see what we are talking today and where we are going. So today when we talk about that Indian Constitution, I'm not going to certainly refer articles and the provisions of the Indian Constitution, but I try to go a little deep into the beyond the provisions of the Indian Constitution, and what is the spirit of the Indian Constitution, and what we are trying to look at it. So if you look at that, the Constitution of India, we all know that one, it is a document and a social contract between the ruled and the ruler, and the people and the state. This we all are aware of particular context of Indian Constitution. But today, I am trying to give you 3 paradigm shifts which have been introduced into the understanding of the Constitution. So the first one is, if you look at that from the perspective of the law or legal or maybe justice, Constitution we always consider that it is a foundation of the legal system and the rights of the citizens. And this I have adopted from readings which recently come up by the scholars, what they are talking about, that what exactly the Constitution. Should we still talk about that Rousseau's ideology of Constitution, where the will of the people is reflected through the social contract? But I don't want to go into that debate in this evening, but I try to put it in the foundation. What is the foundation? And is really a Constitution a foundation of the legal rights, particularly the citizens' rights? If it is a foundation, how it is functioning, and how this is implemented by the government and the governance. So that's the first point you have to understand from the perspective of this today's lecture. The second one is a political. It is a power where the power always try to map the institutions and governance. Always we are riddled with problems of power, unlimited power. And we all know that Part 3 of the Indian Constitution specifically adopted by the constitutional framework and the drafters of the framework only to limit the unbridled power of the state. As we know that state is the biggest violator of the rights, because the state has got power and that it has got its own institutional mechanisms. And that particular institutional mechanisms always try to use and exercise and usurp powers from the Constitution legally. It's not an extrajudicially, extra legally they do it. It's not ultra vires. They use the very Constitution to exercise the power and limit. So how we are going to understand that? Today we have seen that one. I'll give a lot of examples. And that examples can tell us, for example, when we talk about that, the digital media, digital transparency. How transparent is the digital companies today, what you are watching and what you are listening and what you are communicating. And that's very important. If you understand that particular digital transparency today in the context of the constitution and how the state exercises its power, you will understand. A simple example, the last year and when Trump second time came to power in America, and he criticized bitterly the Meta CEO, the Facebook CEO, that is not supporting the government of United States of America. And today also the same thing is happening. Anthropic CEO and one of the CEO, today you can see him sitting in front of the Pope Leo the 14th and trying to maneuver with that, how the artificial intelligence can have a say in the context of the constitution. I'll come back to these two examples a little later. But how the power is exercised is very much important. And in this kind of an unbridled power, where are we fitting and how the constitution is implemented, whether constitution is strictly implemented in accordance with the obligations which have been enshrined in the preamble of the constitution or the fundamental rights, part 3 and part 4 of the constitution. The third one is that it's speaking about reflecting and influencing the shared values and principles, the social cultural principles. Today it is one of the contestant points. And yesterday while I was reading this particular article, and I was also get to see some news which you have seen. Maybe some of you might have seen in the reels, etc. In one of the incidents which happened during the time of Bakrid in Bombay, there is an apartment society and they were celebrating. Before the celebration of the Bakrid, and the Muslim communities have purchased all the sheep and goats and they kept in a small makeshift tent and they were grazing there. Suddenly the municipal authorities and followed by that, you call it the apartment community, came up and said that they cannot do that one. But whatever the rules they might have violated, that's a different thing. And a few minutes later, what exactly happened? A group of splinter groups of some religious groups, they have come with some animal which is against the sentiments of that particular community and released into it. And the state is now trying to support that one. So how diabolical is the situation we are living? That's why I said that reflecting the influences of the shared values, because we are living in a country where diversity is the hallmark. It's not the homogeneity. It's a heterogeneity is the hallmark. Diversity is the hallmark. And it is the strength of the Indian society. But in this kind of diversified society of India, how are we going to respect the values and the shared principles of the people in the name of the social and cultural aspects? And that is the three things which you need to understand today what the constitution is. The constitution is a providing platform for all these aspects, whether it is a justice or cultural, social activities and political power, where it's restricted in the context of the Indian constitution. Okay, if you want the reference, you can read our Indian constitutions, particularly the preamble and the part 3 and part 4 of the Indian constitution, and the principles of rule of law you can understand. The principles of rule of law cannot be compromised at any time towards the implementation of the constitution. So I'm sure it is visible to all of you. I've given some kind of flow chart, and it is going from my left to the right, and the sequence and the serial numbers also has put in such a way that it is going from the top to bottom and coming again down. If you look at that, what are the fundamental and legal political rules of the constitution? What do you understand? And the first thing is that we all knew that, we have studied, we are living, and we know that by heart that is constitution is a binding, and everyone in the state, including ordinary law-making institutions, must abide by that particular law. There is no one above the law. And when we teach in our classrooms about the rule of law, we speak about that this particular aspect. So constitution means there is no one above the law. Everyone must be within the rubric of the law-making institutions and whatever we have today in our Indian context. And if you go down below in the first thing, that is concerns relating to the structure and operation of that institution. The entire constitution today is concerned about how the state is functioning and how the institutions are functioning, whether it is a parliament or a judiciary or executive, how they are functioning and what are the institutions of the government which guaranteeing the political principles and rights of the citizens. And today, when the rights of the citizens are at the stake, but the government is now trying to deviate from its political, and also it is a mandate given by the people in accordance with the constitution. So that's a very warning signal where the constitution is trying to pinpoint on that what the constitution is supposed to be doing. And coming to the third point, that is constitutions must be based on the widespread public legitimacy. It's not that you are witch hunting the political opponents. It's not that you are trying to target that a different voices or dissent voices, or maybe critical thinking, trying to silence the people, those who are criticizing the policies of the government. But today, it is happening. You know that. So that is where we have to see that the constitution is the one which is based on always the widespread public legitimacy. The legitimacy will come only through the constitution. That is the charm of the constitution. And the constitutions are also, we know that, it is harder to change and also than the ordinary laws. And we need to have that kind of a majority and some kind of a sanctity. And we all say that, if that kind of a constitution, and then how come an Indian constitution has been amended, more than 125 times? That's what we all question. But here you have to take, if a good constitution is supposed to be, it should not be abstract, and it should be, such a way that facilitate the changes which are happening in the society and reflect upon that changes and adopt that particular changes and provide leeway to the people for the purpose of providing good governance. So if that is not doing, if your constitution is very rigid, not looking into the changes which that are happening, I don't think that constitution can be doing any better for the rights of the people. So that is why the fourth one is very, very important. The fifth one is that, the constitution as a minimum, they have to meet the internationally recognized criteria for the democratic system. And we are all living in the democratic system. And today, some of the groups, they will talk about that, the fancy of speaking democracy has come to the urban liberals. That's what they call it. And these liberals are become problematic in the society. That's why today there is a systematic narrative created by the state and other political organization. Whoever talks about that democracy, whoever talks about that secularism, they say that these are all foreign words and we need to decolonize from them. And what do you mean by the decolonization? That means you have to come out from the whatever the fancy terminology of the Western society, Western political ideology, and your law must be based upon what you have the culture. So in that context only, you can see that the laws what we have today, the major criminal laws which were amended a year ago, and you know very well about that. The BNS, BNSS and BSA, and what is that? How far we are able to decolonize? Only title or even the provisions. Okay, it's fine. You can do that one. You need to base your legal system based on the aspirations of the people. But how far we are going? So the constitution is the instrument which facilitates to provide that particular aspect. So that is why we have to be very vigilant on that one and saying that the democratic system in terms of the representation of the people, in terms of the protection of the human rights is very, very important. The moment we speak about that human rights in the public platform today, in Indian context, not only in India, elsewhere as well, across the world, because of the rise of the fundamentalism and religious fundamentalism, and the people, those who speak about this particular constitution, democracy, secularism, human rights, they are all becoming the quote-unquote anti-nationals. So, is that what Constitution is speaking about? When we are implementing the Constitution effectively, there is a dissent. The Constitution is based upon the dissent of the people. And when you look at that, and even the part 3 of the Constitution, it facilitates Article 19, when we speak about that, freedom of speech and expression, and all these things, with reasonable restriction, people have the voice. That's the kind of beauty of our Indian constitutions, where the liberal democracies and social democracies have been flourished. That we have to look into that one. The sixth aspect is that Constitution can declare and define the boundaries of the political community. Now here is the problematic statement. This is how far the Indian Constitution today is trying to make a political communities restrained by the constitutional mechanism. Does the Constitution is fit enough to draw the lines for the political communities? Today the political communities are, when they are devising the different narratives, the social constructions to divide the people in the name of various aspects, and does the Constitution provides the way for it? Yes, it does. But the three mechanisms, how far they are trying to protect it. So that is where you need to realize and understand. It's not the problem of the implementation of the Constitution, but somehow they failed to, with unequivocal words I'm trying to tell that, somehow they're failed. I'm not talking about, one or two instances. Recently, the two judges of Tamil Nadu High Court, Madras High Court, they themselves told, don't think that judges are holy cows. This is what they clearly told. Go back and refer. Okay, so that is why, now how far the Constitution is going to declare that particular authority is illegal, it is not as per the due process of law, it is not as per the procedure established by law, and can anybody say that? And the best example is that we can take number of things in this country, what's happening in our last decade plus. And the recent Supreme Court decision with regard to the SIR, all of you know about that. So, what did Supreme Court say? Did they put any limitations on that? They did not. So, that's the question which we will have to look at it. And the eighth and the last one, the Constitution means to us that, it can express the identity and values of the national community. Because we are all living in this country means we all have an identity under the Indian Constitution. Article 5, very clear. And Article 5 of the Indian Constitution specifically says that who we are. And 1950s, the Indian Citizenship Act also subscribes that particular opinion given under the document of the Indian Constitution, who we are and what is our identity. Does it require to prove further? That is where, when the Supreme Court senior advocates were contesting that one, it doesn't require you to prove that you are citizen of this country, but still the Election Commission and the Supreme Court of India said the otherwise. They are saying that no, you may be a citizen of this country, but you have falsely become the citizen of this country. And you need to show your identity today. And what identity? They have given the series of the documents. If one of the documents are there, you are not a citizen. Then what will happen? Your citizenship will be ripped off by the state, and you will suddenly become an illegal immigrant and a stateless person. Once you are declared as an illegal immigrant and stateless person, what happens to your fate? First thing is, you will be treated as a criminal. Either you will be deported to elsewhere, or you will be detained in the detention centers. I think all of you may be getting that what I'm trying to see. Here, you have to prove again and again for the purpose of electing your own representatives that's a constitutional guarantee. But today, the state is coming back and asking you to prove yourself. But I feel that as a student of law, it is an antithesis. Because we have the social contract, we the people of India, we have resolved solemnly, we have constituted ourselves into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. We proved ourselves and we have elected you. Then today you are coming back that I need to check your credentials. That's fine. So how do we do that as a national community? And now this is the biggest point what the Constitution has to address today while implementing. And these are the 8 issues I have taken. There are so many issues, but I don't want to bombard all those pointers to you. That's why I have categorically curated certain aspects so that we can. And now if these 8 agenda items are not there in the state, what will happen? That I will conclude with my last slide. What happens to the state? Okay. Now, what does that Constitution contains? First we need to understand, we know that Constitution is a document and we all studied, but I'm trying to remind you about that. What does the Constitution contain? It contains the preamble, that is the overarching aspirations of the people of this country, or for that matter, any country who is having the social, liberal, democratic constitution, their aspirations have been put forward in the preambles. That's the idea of the Constitution. And also, it provides a national identity. I mean, here, trying to emphasize that because that's the contest today across the country. Whether it is elections in Tamil Nadu, elections in northeast of India, or maybe in West Bengal, or maybe tomorrow here and elsewhere. This is a contestation. Whether you are a citizen of this country, your identity. Until yesterday, even if I don't have that Aadhaar card, or maybe driving license, or maybe any other document, I didn't feel like having one, because it doesn't require for me. There are so many people in this country, because they keep on migrating from one place to other, because the state has failed. They did not address the problems of the poverty. They did not provide the minimum guarantee to the people to work in their own place. When the state is failed to provide the basic necessities to the people, when they are migrating from one place to another place, and you are calling them as immigrants, illegal immigrants, and you are criminalizing them, and you are asking them to go back and prove your credentials. So what kind of a system we are living? Today, if you look at in the southern parts of India, and there are so many people from the northeast, Bihar, and other parts of the world, for the other parts of the country, they come and work as daily wage labor. We may not see in Vijayawada, but if you look at that, the construction which is going on in Amravati, I see everywhere. I don't find any local person there. I don't find any local person. And even if you go to any shop in the metros like in Hyderabad or Bangalore or Chennai, and you don't find the local person coming and serving you a cup of tea and a glass of water. It's all migrant labor. And what happens if you rip off their identity, asking them to prove, that means you are criminalizing them and victimizing them, and the Constitution is failing to get implemented to secure the rights of the freedom of movement and freedom of trade and commerce. We all know that in Article 19, which gives the guarantee, it's a fundamental right. And no one questions. When you question that one, do you get the answer? I don't know. That's another problematic issue. And coming to that, here, the preliminaries. What is the preliminaries I am talking here? The declaration of the sovereignty or the basic principles of the government. As I mentioned earlier, it is my will, your will, the collective will has culminated into adoption of the constitution. It's not that somebody has given. It is you and me has sat and we aspired for certain form of governance, certain form of development, and a certain form of governance. If the state is failing, and what are we going to do? And here, in the name of the territory of the state, citizenship and franchise, state ideology and values and objectives, everything is today is diminishing. Actually, the constitution is the one which is built on that particular primaries. And these are some of the preliminary aspects which have been introduced in the concept of the constitution. As I mentioned, the beginning, the words of the Indian constitution, when you look at that, it clearly talks about that we, the people of India. And we have solemnly resolved to make this state as a sovereign secular. That's a preliminary thing. It's aspirational as well. When leader of opposition talks about that, India's sovereignty is at threat, where the imperialist states are allowing you to purchase the oil based on the ration system, there is no answer. I'm sure you know what I'm talking. When the crisis is going on today, and somebody else is giving permission to you, how much oil you have to use and how much oil you have to purchase from elsewhere. Then what happens to this, the sovereign democratic aspirations of the people in this country? I leave it to you guys, and you have to think about it. And coming to that next, fundamental rights. We have the list of the rights and their applicability, enforcement, and the limitations and suspensions, restrictions, and you have all those things. But today, are we able to enjoy all the rights? I don't think. I'm really scared to go and talk and write something against the state. Against the state means against the policies of the state. Seriously, I'm talking. I may talk with my students in the class. I may talk here with you, but some of you record and put it in the public platform. Tomorrow what happens, I don't know. This is a kind of, duress you are living in the free country. But Constitution provides, you are not trying to criticize a person individually, but rather the policies of the government you are criticizing because you have a right. The right has been given by the Constitution. And now today, when we speak about that there is an erosion of that particular space today in our country, not only us, across the world. And that is why we have to be very careful about that. And when we talk about that, social, economic rights and policy directives. And this particular point we can speak maybe another 2 hours. Supreme Court, once upon a time, they were so proactive. And we are all hailed that it is a judicial activism. Most of the lawyers and public interest litigations, and there are so many things. And kind of jurisprudence has been set in accordance with the Indian Constitution, highlighting the inclusion of the social and economic rights and the directives within the enforceable parameters of the rights. That is where the newly established constitution like South Africa or Nepal or maybe Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, they all adopted from the Indian Constitution certain fundamental rights. Because they said that, yes, this is where the mechanism has to come. It's a duty of the state. But how far the duty of the state today, when my economic rights have been taken away, or it is coming as a onslaught of, whatever the thing which the state is doing, that's a problematic in a file. And coming to that in the parliament and legislature, and look at that in a parliament and legislature. It is a very interesting thing to see that. Today, when we speak about the parliament, the Delimitation Act, we will have to discuss that, maybe. That also takes another, 1 hour to talk about the delimitation. Why do we need to have the delimitation, and what is the requirement, and what is the agenda behind that, and how they are trying to club all these things. So this is a very critical point where we are living, and we need to have that an idea how the parliament and legislature blatantly misleads the people and gives the misinformation. And you try to take your oath of office after your election in the parliament and state legislation and blatantly spread the lies to the people in the name of the constitution in the very house of the parliament and the legislature, and you enjoy the impunity. That means you cannot prosecute any of them for the lies which they are openly, blatantly spreading in the constitutional houses. And what are we doing in the parliament? And what happens to that privileges, the procedures? And these privileges and procedures have been completely diluted. And today, and the constitution is at stake because of that. And heads of the state and method of selection, the power, the terms of office, already in one of the AILU meeting we spoke about that. The powers and functions of the governors. In some states, governors were acting as an agent of the center. And some states, people are going and saying that, yes, we have the consent from the parliament. We have the federal structure. And we have the basic, as a structure of the Indian constitution. And we are all equally competent and equally superior and equally enjoying the constitutional rights. Federalism is one of the hallmark of India's constitution and it's a basic structure, but we are going and asking, can we have our capital in this place or not? You please tell us. I know I am very critical on that, but can you do that? Why can't you have that same thing in your state legislative assembly? Keep it there. You respect your legislative assembly and take the decision, not compromise on the governance methods which you have given by the constitution, compromising and asking that center must give the accord to it. I have not seen that provisions in the Indian constitution. Maybe some of you are you can look into it. Coming back to the government and judiciary, these are the two difficult parts today. Parliamentary are government formation of the rules and the responsibility of the powers. And I don't require to tell much on this, and we are all experiencing, but maybe I'm reading too much. For others, it may not be that alarming, but for me, when I look at that and these kind of things, it's very alarming how the government is compromising on the implementation of the constitution. And the judiciary, the court system, judicial appointments, judicial independence, completely compromised. And the recent appointments, elevations to the Supreme Court is one of the biggest examples of what I am trying to look at it. So, this is how people take, they all do it constitutionally. That's the charm which I am trying to tell you that. Though we say that, they do in accordance with that. And now, subnational governments, like federal or devolved powers between the local governments and the provisions for that, whatever the rules which we have, which I mentioned one example. And now the institutions of the so-called integrity branches, that is electoral commissions, lokpal, audit institutions, comptroller and auditor generals, national human rights commissions, and all the chief commissioner of information, and all these things now. We need to look at that, their constitutional validity and how far they are functioning. But constitution contains all these parameters and shock absorbers mechanisms. And the security sector, the commander-in-chief, and restrictions on military powers. But today, if you look at that, for everything and anything, and we try to make use the different connotations of the military power. And like that, we have the other provisions about the language, about the laws, about the institutional mechanisms, the rights of the groups, the rights of the particular marginalized communities, or the rights of the people, those who are living in the border areas. All these things we need to consult about the constitutional mandate. And at the end, we have the amendment procedures also for that. So this is what the constitution contains. But today, this particular, whatever the mechanisms are there, how effectively implemented is the biggest question. That is what I just want to talk about that. So when we talk about that in a modern democratic constitutionalism, it is primarily based on the two important aspects. What are the two important aspects? The first one is representative governments and the protection of the rights. I hope I'm making myself clear to all of you. Is it clear, all of you? I think I'll just take a minute, if you have any observations and questions, maybe, instead of me giving the monologue, and you can reflect upon that what I said so far. Any observations or any questions? I think I'm disconnected with all of you. Yes, please. There is someone is now standing. Can you take a microphone so that everybody can hear your voice? Guys, can you just share that microphone? Yes, you are.
Good afternoon, sir. I
Good
am
afternoon.
Satyanarayan Raju. I am from Rajahmundry Bar Association. In the earlier session also I attended for your session in 2025. By that time also I am having some objections in your lecture. By taking this as your platform, professional training classes for lawyers, in my observation you are bumping your ideology, anti-national ideology, or that kind of ideology I am observing in your presentation. The topic is about the Indian Constitution and its implementation, and you are talking about SIR and your community violence at Bangladesh and all. These topics are irrelevant in my opinion. Kindly you take it as a positive remark in my observation.
Yeah, thank you very much. I did not expect.
ఖచ్చితంగా తగిన సమాధానం మీకు చెప్తారు సార్. ఏం పాజిటివ్గా నెగిటివ్ తీసుకునేది ఏం లేదు, మాట్లాడతారు.
Okay, sir. I'll just talk about that. Yes, I think last time also, of course, I'm not using this as a platform, but rather, this is all of you know that you get the titles, and I'm trying to persuade anti-national agenda. Okay, so this is what exactly the problem today. If somebody criticizes what we have the constitution, and you get the branding. So I myself told, I don't recall, already I told, if I'm speaking like this any platform, tomorrow what happens to me, I don't know. Seriously, I have that threat. And the second thing, obviously, you said that it's anti-national agenda. My dear friends, there is no anti-national. Yes, if you want to have a healthy system of governance, you have to criticize, because my country is the country which has contributed immensely for the global good governance, and also it has got the rich legacy of providing a constitutional governance. So I'm not compromising on that. The Constitution of India, I'm very proud. I'm very proud of my constitution. The reason being, I've traveled across 22 states, 22 countries across the world. When I get up and speak about the Indian Constitution and its immense contribution to the recognition of the rights of the least of the people in the society, everybody is amazed that the kind of meticulous and addressing of the problems of the people of this country by the Constitution way back in 1950s, when we were not even advanced today like what we are. We don't have, in 1950, nothing. We were broken, we were completely ripped off, and we are standing at the crossroads. But the leaders had a vision what my country would be. Okay, and that country, if today is stepping into a different direction, I feel that I have every right to speak and enlighten my countrymen. That's what Rabindranath Tagore says. Okay, that critical thinking is very essential for us. Certainly I am not here to persuade and to influence anti-nationals here. Okay, thank you very much. But anyway, this is not new. Titles have been heralded against the people, those who talk a reality of the Constitution. Thank you very much. Further coming down to the modern democratic constitutionalism, and it is a representative government. And what is a representative government? Like today in this country, a person who is completed at 18 years of age have the right to select whom they have to be ruled by. And that is enabling citizens to participate in the public office. And that particular thing today, 1950 itself we achieved that one. Most of the countries until 1970 they were not having. If you, for example, look at that, one of the world democracies like United States of America, they never had the voting rights of the women until 1970s. Go back and look at it. And I used to teach in Ireland until 1976. Their constitution simply say that in one particular provision, women cannot compromise on their family duties, putting their family on at the pedestal of degeneration, going and engaging in the public offices. It's a constitutional provision kept in the countries like that. But here today in India, 1950, if you look at that the constitution, I always say that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar could able to envision the equal rights for every citizen of this country. If that particular rights have been violated, and in the name of the representative government, that we need to question. That's why I took the examples of whether it is a SIR, whether it is there are so many in my list. Still I'll speak. And delimitation of the constituencies. Suddenly when we talk about the delimitation of the constituencies, and some says that why can't you do it right now? It is like there is a cartoon come up in the Enadu newspaper. Just go back and see. I have 12 mangoes here, and another mango tree planted, and the government is saying that let that mango tree grow another few mangoes, then I will share. Then the people are asking, sir, what happened? The 12 mangoes are there. You share them first. It will grow later. This is the logic which people are giving. That's true. What happens to that the 12 ripe mango which I am having in my basket? Why can't I give that first? Let that tree grow later. We'll nurture them. We'll provide all nutrients to that tree. Let the tree flourish maybe after a few years. Then we will give, and whatever the share it comes. And what happens to the existing fruits? Why can't you share? It's a beautiful cartoon come up in the Enadu newspaper immediately after delimitation. So this is one of the good eye-opener to all of us, how the representative governments should be. And the protection of the rights, which is, again I take this kind of platform, say that the due process of law, the freedom of the speech and religious tolerance, through which the citizens are insulated from the abuse of the power. The state is always trying to abuse the power, whether here or there. Across the world you can see that in the name of religion, how many violences are happening. This country is also no exception for that, because that's easy prey for the people. Suddenly today you also can see the rise of religious populism across the world as well. The rise of religious populism, and the right-wing governments are coming. People are talking more about the religion. Then what is the danger? If the religion is out of the power, out of the state, what Machiavelli has said in the 15th century itself, religion must be out of the politics. Then politics will have a healthy life and religions will have to deal with it separately. It is like a personal matter of the individual. The why the state want to make it as an apparent. Okay, so that's the constitutions and democracies, and where we have to implement that particular fundamental rules of the Indian Constitution. And further coming to that, when does that constitutions and democracies fail? This is a question. When we are implementing this in a representative government, when we talk about that respecting the fundamental rights, and we have to look at that, when does this democratic constitution fail? So the first thing, what Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has aptly said in his speeches and in the writings, it's very clear. And what he says that, I feel that the Constitution of India is a workable. It is a flexible and it is a strong enough. And it is a flexible to that extent where it appropriates the changing circumstances of the time of the people and gives the wider protection. At the same time, it is a strong enough to hold the country together, both in peacetime and in wartime. What a beautiful word he has written. Indeed, if I may say so, if things go wrong under the new constitution, the reason will not be that we had a bad constitution. What we will have to say is, the man is vile. I think that we need to understand. So please kindly look at this. I keep this particular Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's words always in my mind, saying that it is if I am failing in my duty, I am in vile, because I am not realizing the aspirations of the people. So we have to keep that in mind. When the rulers are forgetting about this kind of common good, and they are only concerned about themselves with the private gain and profit, the politics ceases to be a public vocation and becomes a trade. And again I am going to talk about the current politics. Finance minister in the last few budget meetings, she always, when she proposes disinvestment, privatization and everything, fine, you do it. But they talk about that, government is not here to trade. Government is not here to do the business. That's exactly what all the capitalists want. But they say that, the state, we don't want the state to control us. But when it comes to waiving of their loans, giving the free goodies, and they want state. That's a problematic. When today I want to control the data privacy of each one of you, and these private institutions says that, sorry guys, we are here to promote the freedom of the speech and expression. That's our core value. The Meta CEO told, we go back to our core value, that is flourishing the freedom of speech and expression. Then when we talk about that, what happens? If affects adversely a dignity of person, then are you not going to be responsible? He said that no. My idea of having Facebook and social media is to give the voice to the people. But if the voice become an abusive, what happens? That's a problem. Today, he's happy to create that one, but when it comes to the regulation, he says that, I don't need the state. I have my own mechanism. I have the oversight board. I have my content creators, the content moderators, and the content moderators will do the job. But if the content moderators, how far they are going to understand your sentiments and your cultural values, which have been protected by your constitution, are they going to look at it? We know that today how many people have been abused in the social media because they have shared their opinions. That's a problematic. Okay, the selling of the promises for votes in order to obtain the influence that can in turn be sold to the private interest for personal gains. So this particular paragraph taken from the one of the illustrious writer who talks about that, the current state of the implementation of the state. When you talk about that, the minimalization of the state, when the capitalistic industry came to the state and they're promoting their agenda, they said that we need to have the minimum state. But now they are saying that we don't even want to have a state. And if you don't have the state, what happens to your constitution? Who will implement it? That's the question. Is the corporations are going to implement it? No. They want to have all the benefits. But they don't want to implement the constitution. Because that is why they want to have a kind of authoritarian governance, which I'll come back a little later. That is next my slide. So after this, it will talk about that. So how do we implement the constitution? For the implementation of the constitution, it requires a good governance. What do you mean by the good governance? Is it like corporate governance? Some of you might have studied company law, and it talks about that some 2% of the profit, give it to charity, philanthropy, that's fine. Is it the kind of governance? No, it's not. It is a governance where you maintain a constitutional obligation, such as the basic structure of law. That is the at stake. When the basic structure of the law is compromised by the state, and that becomes problematic today. The reason being that good governance can be compromised. And what are the parameters for the looking at the good governance? The parameters for the good governance is that first thing is the participation. As I told you that representative governance. The representative governance must be there. And how it should be? It is based upon the principles of rule of law. And most of you might be knowing there are 8 fundamental characteristic features of the rule of law. And if you look at that, that 8 fundamental characteristics features of the rule of law, they say that the first thing is that law means it must be applied irrespective of where you belong and what you belong. Whether it's a race, caste, sex, whatever irrespective of all these things. So that's a very important and a fundamental thing. And the third one is transparency. In all the transactions of the governance, we must have transparency. If the transparency is not there, then it will lead to the corruption, the corrupt practices of the state. And today you can see that when the state takes certain decisions in favor of the people, sometimes they lack transparency. And now, when people talk against that particular lack of transparency, then you come back and you attack, saying that there is a band of social media volunteers. They will come and attack, silencing the voices. And next one is that responsiveness. The government must be responsive. If that responsiveness is not there, and if they are compromising on their authority, silencing the people, that becomes a problematic for that effective implementation. And now we need to have the consensus orientation. You need to build that kind of consensus. That's one of the important facets of the good governance. If the consensus is not there, you are taking it that whatever the decisions based upon the mob majority, then there is always compromising the constitutional ideology. And equity and inclusiveness. How inclusive is our constitution? How justiciable and how equity is provided. In the last class also, Justice Sitaram Murthy Garu has mentioned what is that an equity means. It's a justice. Justice with an inclusiveness. The Indian Constitution is the hallmark which provides inclusiveness in the part 3 of the Indian Constitution, including the part 4. And effectiveness and efficiency. When you have that in all wings of the governance, it provides effectiveness and efficiency, and finally accountability. These are the 8 important characteristic features of the good governance for effective implementation of the Constitution. And when does you do it? When you have a, what you call it as, this representative government and the protection of the rights. Then you follow these 8 important principles of the Constitution where you have the implementation. And for the, what are the tools for this effective implementation? We have given that, certain measures for the effective implementation of the Constitution. What are the tools? There should be some tools to implement that one. The first one which comes to my mind is that, the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. That is the first and foremost a tool which requires to be implemented in the Indian Constitution. If the Indian constitutions have to be implemented across the borders of this country, the basic structure has to be prevailed. We cannot compromise on that. And one of the hallmarks of that, that particular basic structure is decentralization and federalism. And how decentralized and how federal you are is, we have to see that in the current context of whatever is happening in this country. And the decentralization of the powers and federalism is one of the things. And in last classes also I spoke about that, how this particular decentralization, federalism was compromised by that particular, the institutions of the governance from the inception of this India as an independent country. Whoever has the mob majority, they try to articulate their power according to minimizing this decentralization process. Whether it is a government earlier or now, that's a problem. And federalism is another hallmark. Now what happens to the federalism today? There are amendments which have been brought by the recent past and centralizing. Everything is one we are taking about that. One nation and one tax, one nation and one license, one nation and one vote, and all these things are kind of things. And where we are going. And it leads to a kind of concentration of the power in the center that becomes authoritarian, that becomes autocratic. If you are not having this kind of decentralization, it's a problem because it provides a separation of the powers and checks and balances. If those checks and balances are not there and these tools are not properly effectively used, then there is an issue of compromising the constitutional validity. Next, coming to the independence of the judiciary and the judicial review and effective enforcement. How independent is the judiciary is the concern today? All of us know that. And if you are not aware, but I know very much, and how independent is the judiciary. You get that your favorable decisions and they will be elevated irrespective of what you are. It happened a while ago, now it's happened as well. That's the problem. And now, institutional watchdogs, human rights commissions, and I don't know, today we have to really see within a kind of very powerfully how this particular, whether existed or not, and if at all existed, how they are working. And election commissions, comptroller and auditor generals, Lokpal, central information commissions, and these are the institutional watchdogs for the governance. They are the tools to talk about that, how constitution is effectively implemented and promoting the constitutional mandate and obligations. And first of all, this is very important, constitutional awareness. It's not that we need to show the allegiance to a particular leader or a person who is a charismatic. But you keep your allegiance, but keep your constitutional awareness for everything what you do. That's very important. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm bringing that one also, public interest litigations, and today we require the digital transparency. Why I'm talking, and it is, AI is completely seeping into the lives of the people. When it is seeping into the lives of the people, it is very, very essential for that, how far we are going to be transparent. But as I mentioned, these silicon sovereigns, which I call it, I've taken from some readings, these silicon sovereigns, and they are digitally colonizing us. When they are digitally colonizing, how effectively we are implementing our constitutional rubrics for the purpose of having that transparency. And the last one, the periodic assessments of the government policies and regulations. Yeah, this is the biggest problem. If I do it in an assessment of this in a government policies, I become suddenly a, what the titles in which we can get it. Okay, so now the failure of the democracy and constitution. Here, my idea, what I have taken from here, there is a very beautiful reports of this one. Democracies do not usually collapse abruptly. It doesn't. They erode due to the gradual weakening of the democratic norms. It's a plan. It is a kind of orchestration of the system. Today, you are putting in your wherewithal and the paraphernalia against the democratic process and trying to weak, and obviously over a period of time these democratic norms will be compromised, and you are guardrailing, and the institutions are compromised, either not sending the people or maybe even though, and you are taking extrajudicial activities against that. So these democratic erosions can lead, what I told, autocracy. And they more often results in lowering the democratic equality and a complete breakdown. So that's what is going to happen. When when you are not respecting your constitution, you attack your constitution, and then what happens? The system will break down. And once if you break down, then it is irreparable. So what are the instances where the democratic erosions can be characterized? The first one, conditions. We have the certain conditions that provide an opportunity to compromise on the democracy. Like eliminating the people, criticizing the people, silencing the people, detaining them, and all kinds of things. It is a condition that you are providing for an opportunity where the healthy democratic voices can be silenced. And the second one is actors, those who are involved, these actors, they try to exploit the conditions and they try to navigate through the anti-democratic agenda, and they do it in a very casual manner. Why they do it in a casual manner? If I am talking about the state, they will say that the moment you talk, and they say that they'll give that kind of brand, or maybe you silenced. And today the first thing what the governments do, they try to promote a splinter group to silence the intellectuals. The moment an intellectual silenced, and these democratic and undemocratic actors can unleash their power without any kind of restrictions. The last one is pathways. These actors, they try to hollow out the democracy by creating the mechanisms. There are certain conditions which they can create, and those conditions are very well defined. And what are the conditions? These are the conditions. And I must expect all of you just to follow this. These are the 8-9 conditions which have been recognized across the world, and where they are the ones democratic erosions involves, and these are the following key features. The first one is erosion of the electoral integrity. So that means what happens in electoral things we don't know. You get elected but whatever the process happens. And the second one is these are all conditions which have been provided. And the suppression of the free press. Today you know that the free press, and we need to look at from that magnifying glass whether we have the free press or not. And weakening of the rule of law, that is already I touched upon that one. You are trying to weaken the rule of law and trying to blur the lines between the separation of the parts. And the next one is shrinking civil society. Civil society is one of the very, what do you call it as, in a healthy democratic society, one of the voices of the people. And that civil society today, if you are targeting them, you are weakening them, civil society, and you don't have supporting mechanisms for the democracy in the country where the constitution can be effectively applied. Targeting the judiciary, it's a better. The more we speak, the more things comes up. And next, rise of the populism. As I told you, the populism, populistic leader, populistic mechanism based upon the majoritarian ideas, that affects on this one. Extreme political polarization, dividing the people based on different religions, different geographical areas, different caste, different sex, different orientations. All these things, you polarize the people, and you are creating a kind of condition to weaken the democracy. And the last one is that information ecosystem, like whatever the information which comes, that information is slowly in a structured manner. You try to orchestrate and curate the information, and you curate the information and give it to the people so that is open for consumption. And that kind of information you are consumed by the people, and they will react the manner in which you are not supposed to react in according to the democratic norms of the state. That's why we call it as democratic backsliding or declining of the democracy. Ultimately what happens? If democracy backslides, if it's a decline, the constitution will be eroded. So that's where I'm trying to talk about that. And the final slide is that most of you, if you are reading, like even Sitaram Murthy also has told, read at least 2 hours per day. Read whatever literature is available. And if you want to read this, Hannah Arendt, The Origin of Totalitarianism. What's this? She spoke about that, to implement the constitution in times of the turbulence, and what makes the constitution fail, that is the rise of the authoritarian and totalitarian rulers. When that seeps into the life of the people, then what happens? Your democratic values, the constitution will be fizzled out. And what are the again characteristic features of this? The role of the populistic leader. A populistic leader sets the narrative, sets the information, unleashes on the people against the democratic values. Single party rule and the elimination of the opposition. This is 8 parameters have been identified by the famous writer. And she has written Origin of Totalitarianism way back in 1950s. Still, that's very relevant for us. And ideology as a controlling force. And people think that constitution is a controlling force to all of us. But unfortunately, in the authoritarian rule, when the democracy is backsliding, and you go back and say that more than that, ideology is the one. And state control over the individuals and society. As I told you, at beginning I said, the state is the most powerful instrument. That is why in all social, liberal, democratic states, the fundamental rights have been adopted by the constitution against the state control and against how the state is dealing with their people. all the rights in our part 3 and part 4 of the Indian Constitution are the safeguards for us. And next one, the police terror and the secret security are part us. And security agencies have been liberally used in order to silence the dissent in the society. And that is how the totalitarian rulers, take power into the system. And next one, the use of the modern technology and propaganda. All of us know about it, how it's working. And finally, the two things are there, the silent majority and mass mobilization. And these traits, if put together, then you lose entire your constitutional vibrancy. So that is why it is very important. How do we implement? If you don't implement properly, if you don't have good governance, if you don't have the independent judiciary, if you don't have the accountability and the transparency, and you fall into the hands of such kind of a situation where you don't even have what you call it as a constitutional governance. I think I'll stop it here. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer the questions. Any questions and observations? And we have a few more minutes, the allotted time for me. Yes, sir, please. The microphone, please, sir.
సార్ నమస్తే, నేను
నమస్తే, sir.
సత్యనారాయణ అడ్వకేట్, ఏలూరు. సార్, ఇప్పుడు ఈ కాన్స్టిట్యూషనల్ ఇంప్లిమెంటేషన్లో ది రోల్ ఆఫ్ ది మాస్ మీడియా అండ్ ప్రింట్ మీడియా సైలెంట్గా ఉండడంలో కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ ఇంప్లిమెంటేషన్ కాకుండా కార్పొరేట్ ఈ వ్యవస్థలో ప్రభుత్వాలకు అనుకూలంగా వ్యవహరిస్తున్న ఈ తీరులో కాన్స్టిట్యూషనల్ ఎయిమ్స్ అండ్ ఆబ్జెక్టివ్స్ ప్రజలకు తెలియకుండా చేస్తున్న మీడియా పాత్ర కూడా ఉంది. ఇప్పుడు ఇచ్చిన ఆ ఐటమ్స్లో ఈ ప్రింట్ అండ్ ఎలక్ట్రానిక్ మీడియా కూడా తన పాత్ర పోషించట్లా. ప్రింట్ అండ్ ఎలక్ట్రానిక్ మీడియా ప్రజల్లోకి తీసుకెళ్తలా. కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్ ఫెయిల్యూర్ అవుతున్న ప్రతి క్షణంలో అవి సైలెంట్గానే ఉంటుంది. కాబట్టి వాటి పాత్ర గురించి అవి ఈ నేషనల్ వైడ్గా చాలా ద్రోహం చేస్తుంది. ఎలక్ట్రానిక్ మీడియా అండ్ ప్రింట్ మీడియా వీటి పాత్ర సైలెంట్గా ఉండడం వల్ల ప్రజలను చైతన్యం చేయాలి. కాన్స్టిట్యూషనల్ అవేర్నెస్ అని గురించి ఒక టాపిక్ ఇచ్చారు. ఆ కాన్స్టిట్యూషనల్ అవేర్నెస్ అనేది ప్రజల్లోకి తీసుకెళ్ళాలి అంటే ప్రింట్ అండ్ ఎలక్ట్రానిక్ పాత్ర కూడా చాలా ఉంది. దాని పాత్ర గురించి వివరించండి.
సార్, థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్. ఇట్స్ అ వెరీ గుడ్ క్వశ్చన్. యాక్చువల్లీ ఏంటంటే మనకి మాస్ మీడియా మీద డిపెండ్ అయిన రోజులు పోయినాయి సార్. అది మనం అంటే క్లియర్గా అర్థం చేసుకోవాలి. ఈ రోజు ఏంటంటే ఒకప్పుడు మనకి టెక్నాలజీ డెవలప్ అవునప్పుడు, తర్వాత ఈ న్యూస్ కానీ ఎనీ ఇన్సిడెంట్స్ జరిగినప్పుడు అవి మనకి రీచ్ అవడం కోసం ఏంటంటే మాస్ మీడియా ఉండేది. మాస్ మీడియా బాగా ప్రివైల్ అయినప్పుడు ఏంటంటే ఎవరో ఇన్సిడెంట్ చూస్తారు, ఎవరో కొన్ని ఎథిక్స్ ఫాలో అయ్యి దాన్ని రాసి అండ్ పబ్లిక్కి మంచి చేయాలని చెప్పేసి అని మాస్ మీడియాని యూజ్ చేసేవాళ్ళు. ఈ రోజు ఏమవుతుందంటే అసలు మాస్ మీడియా చచ్చిపోయింది, లేదు, రిలవెన్స్ కాదు అసలు. మనం ఏంటంటే మనం ప్రతి ఒక్కరం అర్థం చేసుకోవాలి, ఈరోజు మాస్ మీడియా పవర్ కంప్లీట్గా తగ్గిపోయింది. మరి ఉన్న మీడియా ఏంటి? డిజిటల్ మీడియా. ఈ రోజు ఏంటంటే ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ మీరు చూశారు కాక్రోచ్ జనతా పార్టీ, ఓకే, మనం నవ్వుకోవచ్చు, కానీ ఏంటంటే ఇట్ ఈస్ వన్ ఆఫ్ ద వైబ్రెంట్ టూల్స్ దట్ ఈస్ అ డిజిటల్ మీడియా. సపోజ్ మీ అందరికీ తెలుసు, కానీ ఏంటంటే మనం కాన్సన్ట్రేట్ చేయం. ఈరోజు సపోజ్ నేను నా ఫోన్ తీసుకొని నేను ఓన్లీ ఏంటంటే మెన్ అపరల్స్ అంటే మగవాళ్ళ బట్టల గురించి, షూస్ గురించి చూస్తున్నాను అనుకోండి, అదే పంపిస్తూ ఉంటారు. ఇట్ ఈస్ అ కైండ్ ఆఫ్ అన్ ఆర్కెస్ట్రేషన్ ఆఫ్ ద మీడియా హౌసెస్, డిజిటల్ టెక్నాలజీస్. వాళ్ళు కూర్చొని ఓహో ఫలానా ఐపీ అడ్రస్ నుంచి వచ్చిన మనిషి రోజు ఆయన బట్టల గురించి, ఆయన షూ గురించి చూస్తున్నాడు కాబట్టి ఆ అడ్వర్టైజ్మెంట్లే వచ్చేస్తాయి నీకు. ఇంకేం రాదు. అంటే ఇక్కడ ఏమవుతుందో నీకు తెలుసు, కానీ నీ ప్రక్కన ఏమవుతుందో నీకు తెలియదు. నీ ప్రక్కన ఉన్న అతను ఏం చేస్తాడంటే, ఈరోజు సినిమాలు ఏమున్నాయి, ఆ సినిమా రివ్యూ ఎట్లా ఉంది, ఈ సినిమా రివ్యూ ఎట్లా ఉంది అనుకుంటే నీకు అదే తెలియదు. అది ఒక్కటే క్యూరేట్ చేసి పంపిస్తారు. నీ ప్రక్కన భూకంపం వచ్చి జనాలు చచ్చిపోయినా సరే ఎవరు పట్టించుకోరు అది. అంటే ఇట్లాగేంటంటే ప్రతి మనిషికి కూడా ఈరోజు వాళ్ళు ఆ డేటాని అట్లా క్యూరేట్ చేసి పంపించడం వల్ల ఏం చేస్తున్నారంటే, యు ఆర్ ఆల్ బికమింగ్ ఇన్ ద హోల్ సొసైటీ ఆఫ్ ఇండివిజువల్స్, యు ఆర్ బికమింగ్ మోర్ మైక్రో ఇండివిజువల్స్, వేర్ social media has becoming a rampant role to play. Mass media has nobody's listen. ఈరోజు మా ఇంట్లో టీవీ లేదు, మేము మా టీవీ చూడం. ఎందుకంటే దెర్ ఇస్ నో రిలవెన్స్. ప్రతి ఒక్కరి చేతిలో ఉంటుంది మొబైల్ ఉంటుంది. ఏం చూస్తున్నా నాకు తెలియదు, మా అమ్మాయి ఏం చూస్తుందో నాకు తెలియదు, మా అబ్బాయి ఏం చూస్తాడో నాకు తెలియదు, నేనేం చూస్తున్నానో వాళ్ళకి తెలియదు. తర్వాత వచ్చి చెప్తారు నీకో విషయం జరిగింది తెలుసా అని. అప్పుడు మనం అంటాం అని. దీన్ని మనం ఎట్లా చేయాలి, అది అక్కడే నేను చెప్పింది అంటే డిజిటల్ ట్రాన్స్పరెన్సీ. అండ్ ఈ డిజిటల్ ట్రాన్స్పరెన్సీని, ఈ డేటా టెక్నాలజీని మనం ఎట్లా కంట్రోల్ చేయొచ్చు. అది కంట్రోల్ చేయాలి అంటే ద స్టేట్ మస్ట్ బి పవర్ఫుల్ కాన్స్టిట్యూషనల్లీ. ఆర్టికల్ 19 హ్యాస్ టు బి ప్రొటెక్టెడ్, ఆస్కింగ్ దట్ మీడియా కంపెనీస్ టు అబైడ్ బై ద రూల్స్ ఆఫ్ ద కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్. లెట్ us హ్యావ్ ఎ ట్రాన్స్పరెన్సీ ఆన్ దట్. మనకు ఆ ధైర్యం ఉందా? అది లేదు. అదే మనకి ఇంప్లిమెంటేషన్ ప్రాబ్లం. ఒకప్పుడు మాస్ మీడియా, ఎందుకంటే మన గ్రామ్ఫోన్ రికార్డుల నుంచి, పబ్లిక్ రేడియో దగ్గర నుంచి, టెలివిజన్ దగ్గర నుంచి మనం వచ్చేసాం. ఈరోజు ఈ మాస్ పబ్లిక్ మీడియా నుంచి ఇప్పుడు ఏంటంటే ఇండివిజువల్ క్యూరేటెడ్ మీడియా హ్యాస్ బికమ్ ద నార్మ్ ఆఫ్ ద డే. దట్ ఈస్ డెట్రిమెంటల్ ఫర్ ద ఇంప్లిమెంటేషన్ ఆఫ్ ద కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్. అందుకనే ఈరోజు మార్క్ జుకర్బర్గ్ అంటాడు, నాకు నీ స్టేట్ అక్కర్లేదు. ఎందుకంటే నువ్వు అలౌ చేసినా అలౌ చేయకపోయినా కానీ నా శాటిలైట్ లింక్ ఎలాన్ మస్క్నో స్పేస్లో పెట్టేస్తాడు, నేను వాడి నుంచి డైరెక్ట్ చేసుకుంటాను. నీ స్టేట్ కొనకపోయినా నువ్వు స్పేస్లోకి డైరెక్ట్ బ్రాడ్కాస్టింగ్ శాటిలైట్లు పంపించకపోయినా సరే నాకు ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ వచ్చేస్తుంది. ఈరోజు స్టేట్ కనుక దాన్ని కనుక కంట్రోల్ చేయకపోతే ఈరోజు, అందుకే నేను బిగినింగ్లో చెప్పాను, ఈరోజు పోప్ లియో 14 ఆంథ్రోపిక్ సీఈఓని పిలిచి, బాబు నువ్వు వాడుతున్న ఏఐని ఎథికల్గా వాడమని చెప్పు, రిస్ట్రిక్షన్స్ పెట్టు. ట్రంప్ ఏమంటున్నాడు, నువ్వు ఇచ్చే ఏఐ అంతా నాకు ఇచ్చేసే, నేను ఆటోమేటిక్గా వార్లు చేసేస్తాను, నేను అందరినీ ఎలిమినేట్ చేసేస్తాను, నాకు ఆ పవర్ కావాలి అని చెప్పేసి ఆయన అడుగుతుంటే ఆంథ్రోపిక్ సీఈఓ ఏం చేయలేక కూర్చున్నాడు. అందుకనే ఇప్పుడు వారు ఎవరి దగ్గర జరుగుతుంది, ఒకవైపు డొనాల్డ్ ట్రంప్, ఒకవైపు పోప్ లియో. రీసెంట్గా ఆయన ఒక మంచి 45 పేజీల ఎన్సైక్లికల్ ఇచ్చాడు. దాన్ని చదివితే మనకు తెలుస్తుంది అసలు హౌ ద వార్ ఈజ్ గోయింగ్ ఆన్ ఇన్ ద ఏఐ. సో నౌ ఇన్ ద ఏజ్ ఆఫ్ ఏఐ వాట్ ఈస్ ద యూటిలిటీ ఆఫ్ ద మాస్ మీడియా అంటే, యూటిలిటీ ఆఫ్ ద మాస్ మీడియా ఇస్ జీరో. కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్స్ స్ట్రాంగ్ ఉంటే నీవు చేయగలుగుతాం. మీరు ఒకసారి మన సభ్యులు అప్పుడు అంటే డొనాల్డ్ ట్రంప్ రాకముందు సెకండ్ టైం జో బైడెన్ ఉన్నప్పుడు there was a committee established by the Congress and Senate members. They called all the CEOs of the major tech companies. వాళ్ళు ఒకటే అన్నారు, we are ready to do, but we will not give up our oversight mechanisms to the controlling of the state. You do whatever you want to do. వాళ్ళు ఒకటే చెప్పింది కాంగ్రెస్కి, నువ్వేమన్నా చేయండి, మేము మాత్రం గవర్నమెంట్ కంట్రోల్కి మాత్రం ఎట్టి పరిస్థితులు ఒప్పుకోము. కారణం ఏంటంటే మా అందరికీ సెల్ఫ్ రెగ్యులేషన్ మెకానిజమ్స్ ఉన్నాయి మా కంపెనీస్లో, అది వదిలి నీ దగ్గరికి ఎందుకు రావాలి, అది వాళ్ళ క్వశ్చన్. అంటే ఆ రోజే మన కాన్స్టిట్యూషన్స్, డెమోక్రసీస్ కంప్లీట్గా ఎట్ ద మెర్సీ అండ్ ద హ్యాండ్స్ ఆఫ్ ద గ్లోబల్ టెక్ కాంగ్లమరేట్. దాన్ని నేనేమంటానంటే మన ఈ పరిభాషలో ఇట్ ఈస్ అన్ సిలికాన్ సావరెన్స్. దే ఆర్ ట్రైంగ్ టు కాలనైజ్ యూ. నీ ప్రక్కన ఏం జరుగుతుందో నీకు తెలియకుండా ఉండే అంత డీప్గా వాళ్ళు నీలో పెనిట్రేట్ అయ్యారు కాబట్టి ఇట్ ఈస్ ద సెల్ఫ్. అందుకని నార్డిక్ కంట్రీస్లో కానీ ఈరోజు ఏం చేశారంటే